due to an existing free trade agreement. Canada's government says that it's disappointed by Donald Trump's decision. We can get more now on Canada. Let's bring in Candace Laing. She's the president and CEO of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. Great to have you on the BBC. What have you been hearing from Canadian companies after this tariff announcement?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Carl. And there is an important distinction with Canada, as you just mentioned. And while we have the increase from 25% to 35% on the one set of tariffs, we have multiple set of tariffs. And the greater concern is not on this shift from 25 to 35%, although that's not ideal. It wasn't a huge shock or upset to think about it in terms of the Canada-U.S. Mexico trade agreement is still being honored. So the majority of our trade is, crossing our border, Canada-U.S. tariff free. However, the sectoral tariffs, for example, the steel and aluminum sector and our auto sector, should be covered by that trade agreement in normal circumstances, but they have been hit with a different set of tariffs, and that is having a great impact, as is the dark cloud of uncertainty that I think so many nations are struggling with, because it's poison to business, and our businesses, in terms of what I am hearing, are holding on and holding off on tough decisions in hopes of getting a good long-term deal for Canada. And there is a bit of a Team Canada approach, support for our government to take the time needed to negotiate a good deal.
Looking at the various industries in Canada, and obviously many of them are directly linked to the United States, being just huge trade partners, is it possible to look at these industries? Is there one that you think, or two or three, that could be impacted the hardest?
Yes, well, I think when you look at the America First trade policy and some of the underlying aims around certain sectors, and to reposition or move manufacturing and production into the U.S., you do look at the huge impacts that means to sectors like steel and aluminum and autos. But in many cases, the Canadian and U.S., we have for decades optimized and integrated our supply chains, and we make so much together, really together, taking advantage of the geography and strengths we have. So what we're facing now in the pursuit of that aim to reposition or move some of that manufacturing to the US is the undoing or unwinding, or as I say, it destroys the value created over decades. And certain businesses, I was sitting with some of them this week, they're cross-border businesses. They built up their business based on zero tariff cross-border trade. And now you don't just have supply chains between companies, you can have one cross-border business faced with paying tariffs in the US as those goods cross the border, as opposed to investing those dollars in growing their business and creating jobs.
Well, Candace, just briefly, about 30 seconds left, but I wanted to ask you, we saw today actually U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio speaking with the Canadian foreign minister. How hopeful are you that the tariffs that we're seeing now could be negotiated down at some point?
Well, because I understand supply chain management, I have to believe the logic, the economics will see us through this. And I think what have been seeing just recently is more signs of, the impact of this on the economic side. And certain businesses then pushed to the brink. And I know from talking with businesses for months now on both sides of the border, they will speak, they will be louder when pushed to the brink.
Candace Laing, the head of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. Great to have you on the BBC. We appreciate it.